Hello, everybody. This is Shoham here from Penguin Strategies. I'm sitting here actually with Risa from Penguin Strategies as well. And we hope you're on with us. Let's see, some of you are coming in, we see. We're gonna give you a few minutes to get yourself set up for this webinar. And in the meantime, I'm gonna take a few minutes to introduce Penguin Strategies, and then I'm gonna tell you what we're here for today. So the purpose of today's session is to learn about how to build content that both humans and search engines will love. That is the original intention behind this initiative, this webinar. And we have a giveaway, a great prize for you guys. We're very excited about this. It's an amazing book written by Justin, our key speaker today. And we're gonna be giving away 4 copies of this book for people who will join us today live. So if you're lucky, you're gonna get one. If not, you can buy it online. All right, so now a few words about Penguin Strategies. Some of you know us, and I can imagine some of you not yet. So just a few words, we're a B2B tech marketing agency. What does that mean? It means that we specialize in serving companies who are producing technology for businesses. And the services that we do for them is mainly around building their growth machines. Okay, so that includes technology, the strategy, and the execution. We have offices in Tel Aviv and in Boston, and where our team is located in both these places and in other places in the world also. And we have clients all over the world. Our clients here, this is just an example of a bunch of our clients. You see our clients are from mainly the areas of cybersecurity, analytics, big data, IT, telecommunications. Those are the main fields that we specialize in. The services that we provide span across all the services that these companies need for generating their growth and building their marketing machines. And of course, it differs between every client, what exactly is the mix that we do for them, but we're very flexible. We have a system in place to allow this flexibility, and we optimize the mix of services according to the different phases that we're serving the clients for. One of the things that we're well known for is our great love for the GDD, the growth-driven design approach. This means that usually if clients that come to us asking to do a new website, we will suggest to them, and usually with success, we will suggest to them to rather than do a big project and redesign the website, and then after 2 years make a redesign again of their website. Instead, we go for the approach of, let's do first whatever is most impactful, let's do it immediately, and then week after week, month after month, every time we do the next thing that's most impactful. And that's how we grow their website. And in a very, very similar way, we also do all of their marketing campaigns. We build their marketing assets, and with the same approach. So I guess to summarize this approach, some might call this the lean startup methodology. Some might call it the learn, build, and measure cycle. Those are all different names for the same philosophy. Everything that we do, we measure, and then we think whether we can do better, and then we execute on the ideas that we have. And that's an ongoing cycle. which we manage day after day, week after week. So to go now to start, going deeper into the specific purpose for which we are meeting today, I'd like to share with you results that we got from a survey that we ran. We asked our clients, who are usually CMOs of technology companies. By the way, most of our clients are companies that are relatively young, meaning they're not early stage startups, but they're companies who are at a growth stage. Many of them are, or most of them even, are young companies that have already reached their product market fit, but they're now at scale stage. And those startups, those CMOs, we've surveyed them and asked them, what are their top challenges? And the answers that we got are sort of illustrated in this mountain here. And you can see in our slides that it was interesting to learn that in the recent, we did this a few weeks ago, and the top answer that we got from our clients was that they're most worried about their top challenge is sales and marketing alignment. That was a little bit surprising to us, but immediately it got us more geared toward helping them in this area. And we do have a lot of programs around that area. Second thing that was very often mentioned was execution of the marketing tactics, which is always a big challenge for CMOs of younger companies who don't have huge teams serving them yet. And the number 3 was how to build their brand. And then there were other stuff, of course, but it was interesting to see that those companies were worried about their branding more than we had expected. We thought we would get top answer. We're worried about generating leads, how to generate qualified leads. And actually, the surprise was that these 3 answers came higher. So going to the next step in this webinar, we decided to focus on this topic of how to build your brand. And what I want to share with you is our challenge in measuring brand performance. So we, as an agency working with companies that are technology companies, that often they hire an agency because usually they have some lack of resources internal, and that sort of also reflects the fact that a lot of them don't have marketing budgets of millions, okay? And therefore, measuring branding performance needs to be very smart, because to measure it in the more traditional classical way just costs a lot of money. So let me break it up and mention how we look at these goals and then how we measure them. So the branding goals that our clients usually have can be divided into 2 types. One type is around building their brand awareness and the recognition for their brand. And the second goal is around building authority for their brand. And those are a little bit different, and each of them are measured differently. So if we go into how we measure those for them, if we talk about the awareness for their brand, the most classical way to measure it is to put out a survey periodically. Go to some third party and to ask them to survey for us the targeted personas that this company is targeting, and to ask in the survey, please name the brand that you know in whatever field you're in. What are the top brands that you know? What are the top brands that you love? What are the top brands that you value? Those kind of questions. But because we specialize in companies that are B2B tech, and very often they target very specific niches, and their target audience is very, very specific, those surveys are very difficult to do. Because if I give you an example, surveying a bunch of, let's say, CIOs of financial companies is expensive and difficult, and it's not something that the startup, for example, can do often. So that's why we go to the methods that are a little bit less direct, like measuring impressions, measuring mentions, measuring number of organic searches for the brand. So those are things that are much easier and less costly to measure, and those are indicators of brand awareness. Brand authority is measured a little bit differently because we want to know what people are thinking of your brand. And that is often measured by how many followers you have, what is the sentiment reflected in the comments that people have about your brand, what is the engagement that people have with your assets online, how many people are actually interacting with it, to what extent are they interacting. Those are things that are much easier to measure, especially if you have marketing automation, like HubSpot, for example, or any marketing automation. But to the point that I'm getting to now, and sorry about all my emails jumping in. So all of those parameters that we mentioned so far, the KPIs related to the brand, all of them are very directly influenced by how you rank on search engines. And so ranking is something that's very, in today's, people who have some kind of tools that they use, any kind of simple tools, even free tools, measuring how you rank on search engines is the easiest thing in the world. You can measure that daily, even hourly. So that is why it is something that so many companies put the focus on. And that leads us to the reason why we wanted to do this webinar. Okay, so today's purpose, the purpose of today's webinar is to focus on the topic of how to put together a content strategy and a framework for that, will produce content that humans and search engines absolutely love, and that will get you the rank. So I'm very, very happy and excited to introduce to you our guest speaker from HubSpot, Justin Champion. He is a very, very big expert on how to produce the content. And he is responsible for creating and managing HubSpot's training on content marketing. So I'm honored to introduce Justin. So yeah. I will pass the presenting rights to you, Justin, and please take over.
Sounds good. Let me just pull my screen up real quick. And then, all right, there we go. Yeah, thank you so much. That was a great introduction. And I am excited today because as we've reviewed what the purpose is, it really is to learn this content strategy framework that both humans and search engines will love. So from an SEO perspective, it will be something that'll help get your website ranking. But from an experience perspective, we're going to focus on how you can create content and a digital footprint that ultimately will be something that'll be helpful to your audience, to people who want to engage with you. So a couple of things as we go through. This is what today's agenda is going to look like. We're going to talk about creating topic clusters and pillar pages. We haven't really defined this yet, but we will get into that during this section. Then we're going to talk about how to grow this methodology once you understand the framework. And then we're going to end with how to promote content. So actually going through some items of actually, once you create content, what can you do to even get more visibility? We will leave some time at the end for Q&A, but one thing that I love most about doing webinars or trainings like this is actually getting live questions and feedback that we can answer in real time. So as we're going throughout today's webinar and today's presentation, if you have a question, please ask it. Put it in the comments field. I've even talked to everybody on the Penguin Strategy side that if it looks like there's a question that you can even anticipate, please jump in. So it will be, while I will be going through a presentation, I do want to make sure that we have time to engage and answer any questions that you all have. So that being said, let's get started with the first section, which is creating topic clusters in pillar pages. So first things first is, how have search engines evolved? If you think about it, search engines have been around for decades now. There's been some that have come and gone, from Yahoo and Bing. Well, they're actually still around, but when you think about it, Google is the source nowadays that people are going. You can actually find information with the click of a button on your phone, and Google's pretty busy. Google actually processes more than 5.4 million search requests in just 1 minute. Think about that for a minute. It's a lot of people proactively looking for answers to problems that they're trying to solve. And on top of that, there's millions of pieces of content being published a minute. So on one side, you have millions of people looking for content. On the other side, you have millions of pieces of content being published a minute. So for Google, their primary job is to take the search query request of their users and connect them with the most relevant content possible. So with all this content being created and people looking for content, it's really made it difficult for search engines like Google to connect you with the most relevant content possible. And really what's happened is, over the years, there have been different search engine algorithm updates that have come about that have really meant to help double down on understanding search query intent. The biggest two updates, I would say, are the Hummingbird algorithm update. And really what Hummingbird focuses on is parsing out phrases as opposed to specific keywords. Now, this is something I get a question on all the time. Are keywords dead? Are keywords still important? Keywords still play a role, but search engines don't just look at specific keywords. They now look at the context of those keywords and focus on synonyms of it. So instead of just looking at pages that are optimized around a specific keyword, search engines can focus on, what is this page talking about? Is it something that would be helpful for ultimately what this person is searching for? Now, the reason why that's so important to understand is because understanding the algorithm updates that impact you from getting rankings on search engines help you understand how you should approach creating content so you can actually attract those search engines. But search engines aren't the ones that are visiting your website. Search engines aren't the ones that are sharing your content on social media. Search engines aren't your customers. Humans are. And that's a very important thing to keep in mind, because I've worked with a lot of marketers where when I look at their website and actually the content that they're creating, they might be getting rankings, but a lot of times the value might not be there and it might not be solving for that human. And as search engines get smarter, it's going to become increasingly important to make sure that your content is solving for that human first. Because if you solve for the human, ultimately search engines are going to be close behind, because that's the role of the search engine in the first place, is to provide the best experience for humans who are looking for content. Now, how would you go about this? What would be a way of being able to have a framework that solves for the search engine as well as your website visitors? Well, you can think of your content like a series of pillars. It's this stabilizing foundation that's meant to guide and align your ongoing content marketing efforts. So what is a content pillar, right? If we're talking about content pillars, and some of you already may know this, but let's just review it really quickly. Really, in a nutshell, a content pillar, which is known as a pillar page or pillar content, you might have heard hub and spoke, whatever the terminology is, because many people are going to have different ways that they're going to explain it. It's really a website page that covers a broad topic in depth and is linked to a cluster of related content. Now, before we even get into what a pillar page looks like, it's important to note that there are two types of commonly used pillar pages. There's definitely more pillar pages that exist, but these are the two types that I've seen that are bringing a lot of success and something that you can actually get started with when you're creating content. Now, the first one is the resource pillar page. Now, the resource pillar page is really heavy on internal and external links and is really seen as a bookmarkable reference page. So this example to the left that we have from Help Scout on customer acquisition has a section on the page that talks about content marketing. Now, what makes this page so valuable is, yeah, there's a little bit of content about what content marketing is. There's a couple of sentences, but the real value is all these different links that exist that help people, that connect people with these different resources. So instead of trying to educate the person on the page, you're essentially saying, hey, come here, and here's all the different library of different pieces of content that you might want to check out. And that's why it's bookmarkable, because you probably, if you find this page, you might want to keep coming back to it so you can keep going to these different links. Now, again, with a page like this, it really focuses on making sure you're providing the experience with links. So sometimes they can be yours, sometimes they can be yours, meaning your website, or they can be other websites as well. So the big thing with this page is that it's really heavy on links and providing the experience of connecting people as opposed to explaining it on the page, which brings us to the next pillar page, which actually is the 10x content pillar page, where it's focused on a deep dive on a specific core topic. So the resource pillar page is really heavy on links, but really what this page is about is focusing on, if you could imagine like a guide or an ebook, if you took all the content that was in that specific asset and you turn it into a website page. So with this example to the left on email outreach, the playbook on email outreach from Mailshake, which is a simple email outreach tool, they have created a guide and they've ungated it, meaning that they show you all the content as opposed to forcing you to download it. Now this might sound a little, yes, we have a question.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Please, yes.
So if you go back to the previous slide, most of the companies that we come across have a resource page on their website. Everybody almost has a resource page, even companies who have never heard the term pillar page. They don't know what it is, but they have resources. Do you think it's good practice for them to immediately after you finish this webinar to go to their resource page and just choose what cluster topic it is on and just make it, consider it a pillar page, and then just start pointing things to it?
Yeah, so it really depends on what the purpose of that resource page is. Like it could be a resource page that's talking about branded content, and that might not necessarily be something helpful to people who don't know who your brand is. If it is a page where they are trying to rank for something that is more thought leadership or brand agnostic, where you're trying to educate somebody, yes, most definitely. What I would do is I would actually research and look at the page and see, is it already getting traffic? Because the one thing you want to be careful of, usually people who go through website redesigns experience this, is you want to make sure that before you make changes to your content, you want to do an audit of it. You want to see how many if it's getting rankings, if it's getting traffic, if it is, you definitely want to optimize it and increase it. But the last thing you want to do is start stripping content out of it. So I've seen people do that when they go through website redesigns, where they're like, I'm going through website redesign, I'm going to get all new content, it's going to be refreshed, I'm excited about it. And once they go live, then all their rankings end up going away, and it's because they made too many changes. So make incremental changes. Definitely look at the content that you have on your site. And when we go through the examples, I think people understand how the connections can happen. But before you start diving in and making any changes, really make a plan and understand the impact that can happen, as well as what you're trying to get out of it. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so getting back to the 10x content pillar page, again, it should be content that is educating the person that's on the page. Now, one thing that I recommend is if you're gonna spend the time to create content like this, then you should package that content on the page into a downloadable resource. Now, the reason why I recommend that is because if you're gonna take the time to create effective content like this, because it does take a lot of time. If you imagine how long it takes to even create an ebook, especially for some of our visitors on the line that might have limited bandwidth, it can be, you want to make sure that you're thinking about ultimately what are the ways that you can get the value out of this. So having a conversion action like downloading the content helps you from a lead generation standpoint. Now the attribution could still be messy. Attribution meaning that somebody might come to this page and then just call your business and want to do business. But at the end of the day, if you're going to have a piece of content that is like a 10x content pillar page, I highly encourage to package it as a downloadable resource. Now the reason why I recommend that is because ungating content and offering a relevant download solves for the human experience. This isn't some new thing that we're making up. People just want to try something out before making a decision on its value. So that's exactly what you're allowing them to do. So the nature of search a few years ago, people were using landing pages and they weren't necessarily focusing on giving all their content away. But nowadays, you have to really focus on solving for the human first. And to do that, you don't want to just take them to a landing page where they're forced to convert. I'm not saying that landing pages are not important, but you want to think about how you can educate people, build trust and credibility with them before you're just asking them to download a piece of content and hope that it's valuable. Yes.
Justin, just say a word about what is 10x content page, because I'm not sure everybody knows this term.
Sure. Yeah. So really what a 10x content pillar page means is that you are creating a healthy amount of content, meaning that it's going to be there's going to be a lot of information on the page that's going to help educate this person on this topic that you're wanting to write about. So when you think about creating like a blog post and how sometimes it could be anywhere from 6 to 1,000 words, most 10x content pillar pages that I see are anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 words. Now, if it starts getting above that, you might need to think about how you can split up multiple pages. We won't get into that today because I think that if you keep it on one page, it'll be fine. You just want to keep in mind the bigger the page gets, the one thing you want to be wary of is that you're not bogging your load time down, because if you bog your load time down and someone's coming there and it's taking like 30 seconds to load, search engines aren't going to like that because it's not providing the best experience for the people that they're trying to connect them with. So there is experimenting with it, but really what a 10x content pillar page is, it really is just focusing on having a healthy amount of content that is explaining a specific topic in depth. You're not just breezing over it, you're actually really getting into the weeds and helping this person explain it. So when we go back to that example of email outreach, if you actually go through this page from Mailshake, it has so much information as the strategies, the tactics of email outreach, and that's why this is seen as such a valuable page, because it's not just talking high level, it's actually getting into the weeds.
So is the longer the better, or is there a limit to it?
I would say that
issue.
Quality, I would say quality over quantity is what's most important. The goal shouldn't be just to write as much content as possible. The goal should be to write as much quality content that's going to be helpful, because it's not going to be helpful if you think that you're just going to, if you wrote 5,000 words that you're like, well, because I have 5,000 words and yours is 3,000, that shouldn't be the approach as much as generally whenever you're trying to explain something in depth, you have to, there's a lot of content that might go into that. It might include visuals, it might include videos, it might include a good amount of text. I would say solve for making sure that you are providing a helpful educational experience, and that's what a search engine is going to care about.
So if you want to, at the end of this webinar, immediately run and put together a couple of good pillar pages, would a good hack be take your 2 best performing ebooks that you have or white papers and just turn them immediately into pillar pages?
That's a great experiment. So from a limited bandwidth perspective, when I was creating the content marketing certification, I put myself through an experiment where I wanted to create an ebook from scratch. And I obviously am the content professor for the Academy team, so limited bandwidth. And I wanted to put myself in the shoes of the audience that I'm trying to educate and inspire. So I created I decided an 8 blog post series that I would create, that I would repurpose all that content into an ebook and turn into a 76-page ebook. And then what I did was I took that content in the ebook as another experiment and I turned it into a 10x content pillar page where all that content existed on the page. And I started promoting it, getting the word out there. And after, I think it was 14 or 15 months, my traffic on my website went up, I think 1,153%. So from organic, only organic traffic. So from an organic perspective, it's really transformed the way that my website with this experiment, how it's helped get more visibility. And I also rank for the broad term DIY truck camper at the #1 position. So that's the goal, is to try to rank on the first page while solving for the on-page experience. If you can do those 2 things, that's what's going to help provide the best experience for your website. And even if you don't get that search engine traffic, you want to make sure that you're still thinking about the experience you're getting on that website.
Right. So I want to add that if somebody for a minute thinks that you got this 1,000% increase because you started from 5 visits, I want to add that no, that's not the case.
Yeah, no.
We've been seeing huge rise in top of the funnel traffic and ranking, doing this for very diverse types of domains, and this works.
Yeah, I've done a lot of experiments too. Like I did it myself first, worked out the framework, then I worked with HubSpot's doing it. I've worked with different B2B, B2C companies, different sizes, different industries, and it's a framework that works for everybody, because it really, what it's doing is it's focusing on providing the best experience on your website. And just for clarity, so my website, when I originally had the landing page for that guide, I was getting about 180 visits. So this was a website I started from scratch. And after I ungated that content and started doing some promotional things to it, which we'll get into later in the webinar, my traffic last month, I think, was 2,100 visits from organic. So that doesn't include people who are coming from referral websites or direct traffic. This is people who are going to search engines looking for this content. So that's why I believe so wholeheartedly in it. And other examples that I've seen from people that have got really great results, which we'll actually get into here in 1 second from another marketer that I worked with. Which
Cool.
actually brings us to the next point of how do you create a topic cluster and pillar page, right? Because maybe you have a guide or ebook that you want to ungate. Maybe you're creating the content from scratch, but let's go through the methodology or even the framework that is needed, because you really need to understand the ins and outs of it. Because the last thing I want anybody to do on the line is to get excited and jump to it immediately, because you want to make sure that you have a strategy and a plan going into it, because that's what's going to make this approach successful. So the first thing is, just because I'm a visual person, is you need a core topic. Now, a core topic is something that's broad, something that you could be dug into at a deeper level. So encryption key management would be a great example of a core topic, because again, it's something that's broad, but really could be dug into at a deeper level and explained. Now, it's important to note that whatever your core topic is will take the shape of your pillar page. That is ultimately when your core topic, you're trying to rank for this on search engines, which means that you are going to try to create a page that is either going to be a resource or a 10x content pillar page that you're going to educate this person on this specific topic. Now, generally that topic is something that you want to make sure that your audience is using, because if you start getting traffic to your website and it's not helpful and you don't have solutions to follow up with it, it'd be like if you own a retail store and 5,000 people came in, but nobody bought anything. That's not really a successful day. So we want to make sure that we're thinking of core topics that would be something that our audience would be actively searching for. Now, once you identify your core topic, you're going to want to identify a series of subtopics. Now, what a subtopic is by itself, it's providing value in the form of a blog post or a video, but when put together, they are supporting your core topic. So some sample core or subtopics might be types of encryption keys, or how encryption keys work, encryption key lifecycle. Now, one recommendation I have is, when you are thinking about subtopics, think about them in the form of a question. Now, why might that be helpful to people on the line? Why might you want to think of subtopics in the form of a question that supports your core topic? So again, the question is, why might you want to think of a subtopic in the form of a question? I can't see the comments field, but I know that on the Penguin side, you guys can.
Right.
And if somebody hasn't chimed in yet, let me ask you that question. Why might it be helpful to answer or identify a subtopic in the form of a question?
Because that's what people search for. People are actually typing in questions to Google.
Exactly. You're putting yourself in the shoes of your audience, and that's the whole point, is to think about, if you're solving for the experience of your users and your audience, you ultimately want to think about a subtopic that you would want to write about in the form of a question. Now, maybe your subtopic content asset, maybe the actual asset that you create, that blog or video, is in the form of an answer, right? Like you could do it in the form of a question, but I actually would recommend something like in the form of an answer, so that a search engine, if somebody's typing a question and you have an article that is in the form of an answer, you're actually optimizing again for the human experience. And that is again what search engines are looking for. So as we move on,
So
the last thing, yes.
Can I interrupt you again with a question?
Please.
So
Yes.
how do you, so very often lately we go through this exercise with companies and we try to select what are the core topics. And sorry again to be biased towards the companies who have some limited resources for doing their marketing. They always have like a long list of topics they want to rank for. But you have to prioritize, right? The list is limited to how much content you can produce. So you concentrate first with one or two topics to start with. So then there's always this dilemma whether to go for something that's very, very important to you and difficult to rank for because it's very, very popular. It has a lot of search volume in the world, but it's hard to rank for this. Or to go for topics that are very specific to your niche, easier to rank for, maybe things that are very new, they're new technology and still not a lot of volume, not a lot of people are searching for this, but you're hoping to own this term, forward-looking to gain authority on this term in the future. But at the moment, there isn't much volume. So there's the dilemma where to put your effort. How do you suggest they deal with that?
Yeah, so I think that's like a two-part question. The first one of how do you actually identify core topics that you should be ranking for? Now, what I'm not saying is that for anybody who's like in the B2B marketing world, I'm not all of a sudden saying that you would want to rank for, I'm not encouraging you to try to create a page on search engine optimization and try to rank for search engine optimization, because that probably has hundreds of thousands of monthly search volume with really effective content that's going to be hard to get rankings for. But what I would say is, think about your core topic as a contextual driver of a like a reach term of something that you would want to develop website authority, you want your website to build authority around to be known for. So if you want to be known for search engine optimization, the best thing you can do is think about a core topic that's going to contextually support it. So maybe SE, or maybe it's search engine optimization tips and strategies. You need to do work to understand a core topic that can ultimately be aligned with, like, search engine optimization might have a monthly search volume of 500,000, but maybe search engine optimization tips and strategies, which is contextual and it explains what you're actually trying to understand about SEO, might have a monthly search volume of like 1,500. So with core topics, I generally recommend try to keep them under 2,500 monthly search volume. Again, that's very prescriptive. That's not even looking at your website authority, how many inbound links you have, meaning that how authoritative does Google see your website? How credible is it? Because the more credible your website, the easier it is to get search rankings, which is probably why if you search for any marketing content, HubSpot is showing up because we are a more credible source. We've been creating content for a long time. We've developed a lot of links, but for newer sites, keep the monthly search volume below 2,500. And because the average first page ranking will also rank well for about 1,000 other keywords. So if you're ranking for something like encryption key management, chances are you're going to be ranking for all these other keywords. So try to keep a core topic that's something that you would have the opportunity to rank for. And if you're looking for a tool, if you're, a HubSpot or non-HubSpot customer, keywordseverywhere.com has a free plugin that you can attach to Chrome or Firefox that'll allow you to do keyword research directly on Google. So that'll help you understand monthly search volume as a starting point for identifying core topics that you could rank for. Now, for the niche industries, and just in sake of time, niche industries, I would be wary of trying to create content around terminology that is not used yet. For instance, GDPR, which is this new email law that came out recently. If somebody knew that GDPR was coming out a year or two ago and they can anticipate that the market, this would be something that people would actively be searching for, it's extremely strategic to write it before the market actually, people are writing about it, because then your competitiveness, the competition in the industry isn't really there, so you have an easier time of ranking. The one thing you have to be wary of, though, is if you have to be certain that even though the terminology is not being used yet, it would be used. So be very careful of doubling down on writing around content that doesn't exist yet, because you run the risk of people not ever searching for that. So what I would do is I would focus on trying to rank for a term that is something that they use while wordsmithing and fitting in this terminology that you also want to educate them. Maybe it's a subtopic of a core topic that you want to write about. Get in there and write that content, but don't double down on something if the search volume isn't there yet, because that could be a little bit dangerous.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question. So the last thing is when you have these subtopics and you have this pillar page, the one thing you must do to tie everything together that's going to solve for the search engine as well as the website visitor is you need to link everything together. That's why this is called a topic cluster. So if you're a human and let's say you find a blog post on types of encryption keys, you find it valuable, you see how it links over to this page where you can learn even more about encryption key management. And if you're a search engine, they're going to crawl through that content or search engine bot's going to crawl through that content just like a human would read it. And they're going to see how all these things are connected together and how there's this cluster of related content. Now, the reason why this is important, mostly from the human perspective, is because whatever content you're finding, any subtopic content asset that you're finding, again, it could be a YouTube video, it could be a blog post. If it's connected to that pillar page, you're essentially optimizing for the experience to say, hey, this pillar page, remember, it's that stabilizing foundation. You're trying to get everybody over to it. So the goal is to link to that pillar page. Now, the pillar page can link off the subtopics and other content, but you want to be strategic of links you're putting on that pillar page, because once you get somebody there, you don't generally just want to send them off of it unless you're trying to focus on getting them to convert on something. So encryption key management. How many people actually know what encryption key management is? I've been doing this workshop tour and generally I have like 1 or 2 people who really know, but where would you go to find more about encryption key management? Probably go to Google, right? Type in encryption key management and it would be, this is what the first page of the search engine result looks like. So at the top, you have this featured snippet. Featured snippet's a way of Google answering the context of your question without you even having to click through. So by you type in encryption key management, they're showing you the definition of it and they're showing you the image of it. Something interesting with the featured snippet is that you can actually share. There's two opportunities. You'll notice the image feature snippet is Townsend Security, and the text-based feature snippet is Wikipedia. Now below that, you'll have the #1 Google ranking, which is the definitive guide to encryption key management fundamentals, which is Townsend Security. Now, in an ideal world of trying to rank for a broad term like encryption key management, this is what you're trying to strive for, the featured snippet and the #1 Google ranking. And remember, the #1 Google ranking for that specific term, you're probably going to be ranking for 1,000 other keywords. So that's why it's so important to focus on doubling down on a topic that you want to rank for, because you're going to get a lot of other rankings out of it if you can get it to the first page. Now, if you wanted to learn more about encryption key management, if you click through to the page, you can see that visitors can easily navigate the page's content. So this is a great example of a 10x content pillar page where there's a lot of images, there's a lot of content that is really helping this visitor understand encryption key management. And then they offer this content as a package download. So like we recommended in the beginning, if you're going to take the time to create content like this, have a package download. And one thing I did when I checked in with this marketer is they told me that 63% of the people who visited the encryption key management pillar page decided to download it and take it with them. Now, average conversion rate based on your industry could be anywhere from 10 to 20%, so 63%. The reason why this is so effective is because they took the time to create content that was going to be helpful for their audience. If you're just creating content that is noise, something that's already been said, this won't work for you. You need to really focus on making sure that you're providing the best experience possible. And if you package it, somebody might read that content, because if you think about that human experience again, they might read one section and say, hey, this is really valuable. I might want to either read this weekend when I'm going on the plane, or maybe I want to share it internally. And if you have a packaged asset, you're essentially optimizing for the experience of allowing this person to consume it, where they don't just have to have a wireless connection. You could be like me and be on somebody's porch trying to do a webinar. And if your wireless goes out, you actually have a asset that you can go back to.
Very cool.
Awesome. Now, the other thing that's important with this is that Townsend Security's non-paid organic traffic coming from search engines increased 100% in less than 10 months. So that's a big stat, because they've been creating content consistently since 2011. So when you think about getting 100% increase in traffic in just the last 10 months, this is something that got the team so excited that the CEO stepped up to create the next pillar page. And that gets me excited, because I've worked for different organizations, and whenever I see a CEO so excited about the impact content can have on their business, even when they've been creating it since 2011 consistently, it shows me that content is becoming a business-wide initiative and not just a marketing initiative. Not that it shows me that, but it's important to have content be a business-wide initiative, because you need the commitment and the buy-in from the entire organization if you want to create effective content like this that can really help transform the way that people are experiencing content that you're going to be creating. Now, that was really an overview of creating a topic cluster and pillar page, but I want to say that when you think about creating one, it is always under construction. Maybe you just get a minimum viable product out and you launch it, and you have to think about the different maintenance and updates and additions that you can be adding over time to perform at a high level. And the reason why I recommend that is because the one thing I love about digital media is you can actually do research on people's content, see what exists out there, and do something better than them. So if you just create something and leave it, you're leaving yourself vulnerable. Like if you get the #1 position for somebody else coming in and saying, hey, this is good content, but they missed this, this, and this. I think I could create something that could provide value, and then they could steal your ranking. Brian Dean from Backlinko has this skyscraper technique that people use, which is exactly that, researching content that exists and then creating something that's more valuable than that's already out there. So the best thing you can do is constantly be updating your content once you publish it, and not just forget about it. Because if you do that, you run the risk of losing those rankings over time. So there's 4 different things that I recommend of ways of how you can grow your pillar page based on the experiments that I did with Townsend Security. Now, the first one is offer various forms of media per section for the reader to engage with. So what I mean by that is Townsend took that content, and they created an interactive infographic via HTML5. I love HTML5 because it's search engine friendly. They can actually click through the page or that image, get different pop-ups with content on it, and search engines can read that. So it's providing a positive user experience while solving for the search engine at the same time. Another thing is repurposing content into infographic-like images. So if you're going to be talking about data and stats, think about how you could create interesting images. Maybe you create one long infographic and you chop it up and put it throughout the post. or throughout the page, but ultimately you want to have images that support your content, so it's not just very text heavy. You're not reading a novel here. You're trying to be educated on a specific subject matter. So I really recommend creating images that you can parse throughout the page, and then again you can optimize it and even get in the Google image search for these specific images, which if we go back to I'm not going to scroll back to it, but Townsend Security had an image that showed up in the featured snippet. So that's why it's so important to think about images and optimizing them accordingly, because then you're thinking about either getting the featured snippet or even Google image search. Now, the last one, and this is probably one of the most important ones, is create possibly like a short video. Like Townsend created a 1 minute and 10-second video and have it at the top of the page. Let me ask you a question on the Penguin side. Why might it be helpful to have a video and have it at the top of the page?
Well, first of all, more time on the page, more engagement.
Exactly. So more time on the page, more engagement. It's another opportunity to get a ranking. Like if you put it on YouTube, YouTube's a search engine friendly channel. You can get a ranking for on search engines for that specific video. But the most important thing is if you make it short, right? Like don't make it like 10 minutes. If you can make it like under 2 minutes and you can keep that person on the page, you're solving for the search engine, because you're showing the search engine that this person isn't just coming to the page and leaving right away. If you can somewhat show the search engine that someone gets to that page and maybe they stay on it for 1 to 2 minutes, it shows that this person is interested in the content. So on one side, you're providing an experience for this user, helping the human coming to the page, telling them what this page is about. And for the search engine, you're saying, the search engine's like, oh, this content, you know, the people are staying on the page, so that helps your ranking. So it's important. A video is one tactic I recommend having on your page at the top. And really, if you create the infographic, let's say you create an infographic, you can almost create a video that chops up the infographic and then just walks through it with text over top of it. So think about ways that you can get creative with video, but I think video is one important tactic to help your pages get more visibility and even provide a better experience. The next thing is to sprinkle relevant content offers that will help the buyer persona continue educating themselves through the buyer's journey. So the buyer persona is your hypothetical, semi-fictional representation of your audience, and the buyer's journey is ultimately what this person needs to learn down to making a well-informed decision. So one thing I love about Townsend Security's page is they sprinkle offers throughout the page, whether it's a podcast, whether it's another downloadable offer. So you should think of this page as almost a launch pad to be able to get exposure to your other pages that exist. And maybe you're on those other pages, you're also promoting this page, but the goal is that people love to binge content. When you think about, I just finished this show Safe on Netflix. I watched like 8 hours worth of content in 2 days. We're just in a binging stage nowadays where people want content. They want as much of it until they are ready to make a decision or they want to learn something else. So think about how your page can connect to other offers that you have so that you can continue educating this person, because an educated person is going to be, your sales team is going to love you. So by the time they get to sales, they will be well informed and already ready to make a decision so that the sales team doesn't have to start from square one. Another piece is insert a heat map on the pillar page to better understand the optimization and performance next steps. So this is important because if you have a lot of conversion actions or clickable opportunities on the page, it can get really hairy to understand the experience or what people are actually finding value in. I did this experiment, and before we had the heat map on Townsend's page, it was hard to understand which offers were being clicked, where on the page the value was coming from. And we put a heat map on their page, and funny enough, at the top, before anybody was educated, and this is why it's so important to educate people as opposed to just forcing them to download it. Look at the top of the page to the left. Everybody was clicking around everything except for the link to actually go download this offer because they hadn't looked at it yet. Why would they do that? There's no reason to. But interestingly enough, when we put this heat map on the page, 3/4 of the way down on the page, there was a call to action to go to the offer. So once this person was educated, once they had found a little bit of information on encryption key management in this specific section, key management, well, I can't even pronounce that because I still know, I don't really know too as much about encryption key management. What I do know about this page is that 3/4 of the way down the page, once they had learned more about it, that's when they were ready to convert and take that offer with them. So if you're looking for a free tool to do a heat map, hotjar.com will allow you to put a heat map on your website. I think they even have like a trial period, but I highly encourage you to put one on your entire website so that you can actually see visually where people are interacting with your content so that you can make well-informed decisions down the road. And before I keep going quickly, obviously, because I feel like I'm going a little quick, I want to make sure that if you think that there's any questions or anybody on the line that has asked anything, I want to make sure that I'm leaving some buffer time for that.
So actually, there are some questions. I didn't want to interrupt you because I know you have still some very important things that you would cover. But let me just give you something to talk about if you have the time.
Sure.
Which is a lot of tactics. Once people go out and talk about them, then everybody copies this tactic, and then it stops working, right? Yeah. So can you say a few words about whether making pillar pages and clusters and topic clusters and linking the topic clusters as a tactic, is that something that you think that is going to work in the short term? Because right now, not many people are doing it. And it's true, right now it's super effective. And as more people do it, will it become less effective?
I don't think it's going to become less effective. I think you have to, it depends on how you're thinking about the interlinking. So it's a great question because the goal is to solve for the human first. So you're trying to create a digital footprint that connects people with how they should be learning on your site. When the last thing you want is to have a website where somebody comes to and they don't know how to guide themselves through it to educate themselves, right? Like if you have a YouTube video and you're not connecting it to content on your website, there's a missed opportunity where you're not thinking about the user first. So the way I would think of this is you want to create content that's going to be helpful for the user. You want to create an experience that guides them through your content so that they understand what they should be, the opportunities they have to learn versus them having to figure it out, because that's the biggest thing. And the reason why this approach is so helpful is that, yes, it helps from an SEO perspective and you can get really great results on search engines, but really what you're doing is you're designing your digital footprint in an experiential way where if somebody is engaging with any of your pieces of content, whether it's on your website, whether it's on a platform like YouTube or even social media, you want to make sure that you're being helpful in directing them to where you're going. So the linking strategy helps search engines understand all the content, how everything is interlinked. And how you have this cluster of related content, but really what you're doing is from an experience side and human side, you're helping people get to the points of where they can convert and ultimately turn into a customer once they're educated. So it's not a tactic I see going away. I think it's something that it's more of a strategy that is thinking about how everything is interconnected, because the last thing you want to do is have specific strategies and tactics for all of your channels, because then you're going to create a disconnected experience. You're really just creating a connected experience with this.
Right. Well, thank you. I totally agree with you, but I would say that my feeling is that everything that you said is totally true, but still right now, because not a lot of people have implemented this yet, there's still the extra impact that you get better results than the others who are not doing it. So that is just an extra reason to do it quickly.
Yeah, and
before your competitors do it.
But see, search engine optimizers have been doing this for years. I think what we're doing now is we're teaching people how to break it down and simplify the process. And what we're teaching today and explaining is really just like the tip of the iceberg, right? Like if you did this, it's a launch pad. It's prescriptive advice, but you as a business, as an organization, need to be descriptive by doing different experiments and things that others aren't doing. You want to find ways that are going to be helpful for your audience. And ultimately, you have to get creative. You don't want to just do what everybody else is doing. And the best thing you can do is understand tactics and then start solving for getting ideas and getting creative. Like all these different things, there's no difference between me and you. As the one thing I like to do is I like to think of experiments and go through everything so that ultimately I understand what works and what doesn't work. So what I would say is anybody who's going through this, the linking is something that linking your content together is not something that I see going away. What tactics and ways of helping search engines understanding the value of the content and getting more exposure, there's new channels that are coming out. So things are always evolving and changing. So it's more of adding layers to a baseline foundation.
Okay. Okay, so I know there's two things that we only have a few minutes, and there are two areas where I feel that you haven't covered yet. So maybe you can comment on them. You decide to what extent you can go in these few minutes. So one topic that I'd love to hear your top tips on is what's the most effective way to promote your pillar page once you put it together? if there is anything more specific about pillar pages than promoting other content. And the second thing that I wanted to ask was, wait, I forgot for a minute. So go for this one and then I'll tell you.
Yep. So there's a specific section on the promotion piece. The one thing I just wanted to say left in this, in the growing your pillar page is, some people ask me sometimes, what if you have a subtopic that's strong enough to turn into a pillar page? That is starting to think critically about the experience on your site. If you have multiple pillar pages, ultimately, how do they connect with each other? If you have a subtopic that's doing well, maybe it could be turned into its own pillar page. So ultimately, I would say what you should think about as you're creating this approach is designing out your topic clusters and pillar pages you want to create, but sometimes your subtopics will be so strong that they will turn into their own pillar page. And that actually happened with Townsend, where they created their next pillar page on SQL Server Encryption, which was a subtopic of encryption key management.
Yeah,
Now,
so that actually reminds me of the question that I started asking and I forgot.
Yeah.
So the whole issue of cannibalization is very critical when you're choosing your topics and subtopics. And maybe you can explain just a little bit of what's the best practice in how to choose subtopics that don't cannibalize the main topics, that don't cannibalize your other topics.
I would say think of your subtopics as puzzle pieces for your core topics. So you don't want to go too in depth on a subtopic that is going to cover, like, that's the whole point of it, right? Like if you're talking about encryption key management, you might have SQL Server Encryption, where you can get really in the weeds of SQL Server Encryption, but it's supporting encryption key management. That's why sometimes you might have an opportunity where it turns off into its own pillar. But what I would say is, don't worry about the cannibalization of the best thing you can do is essentially identify what instead of just looking at the first pillar page and topic cluster, what I've been doing this year is having people think about ultimately what would you want to rank for, right? Maybe search engine optimization is something you want to build website authority around. And then I have people think of 5 core topics that are similar, that are contextual drivers of SEO. So maybe it's like SEO tips and best practices. Maybe it's SEO strategies for 2018. Think about those different core topics and think about ultimately what your website architecture is going to look like. If you think about your website architecture at a high level before you create anything, it'll help you understand, once you get your first topic cluster and pillar page, where you grow from there versus saying, okay, now I have this, what do I do now? So I think planning would be the one thing that would significantly help identify this topic cluster pillar page approach for multiple pillar pages across your website. Now, getting into the next piece of promoting your topic cluster and pillar page, just because I know we have a couple minutes left, you really want to make sure that you're not just creating content in hopes that a search engine is going to find it. Because if you fail to promote your content, then don't expect anybody to come. It'd be like if you had a birthday party, you spent hours, days planning it, but you didn't tell anybody that it existed. That'd be a sad birthday party. Just the same thing with your content, is you want to make sure that you're giving it some love. And what I think of is, Sama Jaffrey has this quote of create less, promote more. Now, I'm not saying you should spend less time creating content or spend less time focusing on the creation of your content. You should just be focusing more on promoting it. So once you create an effective piece like encryption key management, you don't want to just jump to the next thing you're creating. You want to focus on promoting it. So there are some strategic tasks to achieve in the long term that really can help you significantly improve how to promote your content. And those are some of the things I want to talk about. The first thing is build relationships with industry influencers. So people that you would want to contribute your content, things that they might be able to help with a quote down the road. Now, it's hard. You don't want to just go to these people and ask for their assistance. And as an example, Lolly Daskell, who is a very well-known best-selling author, I don't know I've never had any communication with her before, but I loved a post she did on Inc. So I tagged her in it. I said an interesting line that I liked about it. And then Lolly came back and said, thank you, Justin. So if you think about it, the best thing you can do is build relationships with influencers. So ultimately, down the road, if you want to maybe collaborate with them and have them create content with you, or even help you share your content, you don't want to just all of a sudden ask for something where this person doesn't know who you are. So take the time to develop relationships with people that are important in your industry. The next thing is guest blog on authoritative websites. This is a big piece. So let's say you blog once a week, you blog 52 times a year. I would highly encourage anybody on the line who's blogging to think about trying to do more guest blog posts than blogs on your own website. The reason why I recommend that is because you can get inbound links back to your website. An inbound link is a link coming from one site that you do not own or manage that is linking to your website as a vote of confidence. So as an example, I wrote an article on BuzzSumo, which is a great social media researching tool, and you'll see I have a link for content marketing certification that goes right over to HubSpot Academy to promote that specific piece of content. The reason why that's helpful is because if you're building topic clusters and getting links from other websites, you're going to boost your website authority. And if you have more website authority, Google is going to see you as a more credible, authoritative source, and that's what's going to help you get ranking. So I can't stress enough, focusing on website authority, and guest blogging could be a way that you can not only increase your website, or sorry, your industry exposure, but you're also getting inbound links to your website. Another thing is become active on industry communities. So I took that content from that BuzzSumo post, I syndicated it over to inbound.org, which is now growth.org. And that was another way of being able to build links and also find a community of people that were looking for content. So don't just think about guest blogging on other websites, think about community websites that exist within your specific industry that people might be visiting. Another piece would be boost top performing content on social media. So if you're spending ad budget, don't boost every single piece of content. Think of your social posts that you're doing as experiments. And if you find one that's maybe getting more likes or shares, and maybe it's connected back to your website, think about adding some ad dollars to it. So when you think about boosting top performing content, don't just boost all your content, focus on content that's working so you can conserve your ad budget to get the maximum value for where you're spending your dollars. Another piece is launch a remarketing ad campaign. So if somebody visits your—
Justin, just a second.
Yes.
You said boost it on social, and then you said don't spend your dollars. So boosting on social is not necessarily spending your dollars. Let's remind people.
Yeah, so boosting on social, I'm saying more or less, I'm saying that you want to strategically use your ad dollars versus just boosting every single post. Because I've worked with marketers where they are boosting all of their content because they want to get more visibility to it, but that really shouldn't be the goal. You want to boost content that is something that is showing an indicator. Larry Kim from WordStream is a master at this. He'll do a post on Twitter, and if it does well, then he'll add ad dollars to it. And if it does really well, then he'll write a blog post on it. So you want to use everything as an experiment and not just spend money on every single thing that you do. Be strategic.
Oh, so now I understand. So that when you use the term boosting, you meant adding dollars to the organic posting.
Yes, sorry. So
okay.
The post that you do on social media, if something starts doing well, you can boost it by adding ad dollars to it to get more exposure to that post.
That's clear. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Launch a remarketing ad campaign. Let's say if somebody went to that encryption key management pillar page and they didn't download it, that person is highly qualitative. So what I would recommend is doing a remarketing ad campaign, which is probably why if you go to wayfair.com to look at a couch and then that couch is following you on Google, it's following you on Facebook, a remarketing ad campaign is using ad dollars to target people that have already looked at your content to try to get them to come back. I generally think about showing that ad to them 2 or 3 times, because if you show it to them too many times, it'd be like if somebody's driving down the highway, if they didn't find value in the first or second billboard, they're not going to find value in the 8th or 9th billboard. So think about the frequency. Next thing is to repurpose content into new formats. So we've already talked about this. So if you have a blog post, think about creating it in a video form. And the reason why that's helpful is because if you think about creating, and if you think about content that you've already created, if you can repurpose it into a new format, it's not duplicate content because it's on a different platform. So think about the platforms that are SEO friendly, that get you visibility, like YouTube or even SlideShare if you have slide decks. But I would highly encourage repurposing content is probably the best tactic or strategy for marketers who have limited bandwidth of how to continue creating more content. Now, the one final thought I want to say is that we've reviewed a lot of things today. I understand everybody's heads might be a little swollen, because especially I feel like I might have gone a little fast. But one thing I want to highly encourage everybody to think about is you're in this for the long game. That the DIY truck camper example that I said at the beginning, that was something that transformed my website, but it took some time. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight, next week, or maybe even next month. You need to really put in the time and effort, really plan out what you're ultimately looking to achieve. And then over time, it could be something that you'll start seeing those incremental results. Really stick with it, because it's a marathon. It's not going to be a sprint.
Wow. Thank you so much, Justin. It was very, very interesting and eye-opening for me to hear you talk about it so comprehensively.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. You've increased our motivation here to do more of this. And I think our time is up. So what we're going to do right now to conclude is now people who have heard you, I'm sure, are dying to be the ones that are getting the book. So we're going to now draw out the 4 names, and they're going to get an email in the next 5 minutes to notify them that it's shipped and it's on their way.
Very cool. And one cool thing about this book for anybody that's on the line is that as you read it, think of this as like a content marketing textbook. There's different activities and homework that you can be doing after each chapter. So if you're trying to build a topic cluster and pillar page from scratch, that's what the end result is of this book. Everything that you learn in it, you learn how to blog, you learn how to generate content, you learn how to repurpose content, you learn how to promote it, and then you'll have the activities that'll help you transform. But at the same time, once you read the book, you'll be ready to take the content marketing certification final exam from HubSpot Academy, earning yourself a credential. So while you're transforming, you can earn a credential at the same time that's globally recognized.
Wow, that's fabulous. Thank you so much, Justin. See you
Awesome.
next time. I hope soon.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you guys again for having me.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.